The great Solid Snake once said, quote, "Everybody feels sick the first time they kill someone. Unfortunately, killing is one of those things that gets easier the more you do it. In a war, all of mankind's worst emotions, worst traits come out. It's easy to forget what a sin is in the middle of a battlefield." Alright, so I spared you my Solid Snake impression, it needs a lot more work, but I think the point that solo developer Jordan Moki wants to make with this particular title, Conscript, is that war sucks. But does Conscript stink like a wet rug, or is it destined to receive a Medal of Honor? Well, let's find out in our full review. Real quick, consider doing the supremely honorable thing and supporting independent content like this by liking and subscribing to the channel, or heading over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames where you can gain Discord access and more. Our live streams more your speed? Well, we have those too on Tuesdays and Thursdays here and at Twitch. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. I should start this review by saying I am a massive fan of classic survival horror games. The PS1 remains one of my favorite consoles of all time, and of course, just about everyone that owned one at one point or another likely came across 1996's mind-blowing Resident Evil. Resident Evil was not the pioneer of the survival horror genre, but for many, it's the first game that comes to mind when they think of it. Hell, I can still recite many of the ridiculous lines of dialogue all these years later, such as, "Wait, don't open that door," or, "But Chris's." That's a gun sound, by the way. Alright, you get the point. It was an influential game, and I loved it then, and I still love it a lot now. So it always warms my heart to see indie developers create classic survival horror games. But what happens when you take that familiar formula and stick it into a World War I setting? You get a pretty interesting gaming experience called Conscript. Conscript takes place in the year 1916, when the ongoing war seems to be at its worst. Germany is applying heavy pressure on France, who themselves are holding on by a thread. Your story begins in the deep trenches of war during the month of July. Stuck in the Battle of Verdun, you are separated from fellow soldier Pierre, and are now tasked with not only surviving this war-torn world, but reuniting with Pierre and escaping with your life. It goes without saying that the World War setting isn't exactly new territory in video games, but it isn't all that often that I've seen it utilized quite like Conscript does. War is obviously gruesome and terrible, so it makes sense to have it be the basis for a survival horror setting. The grisly atmosphere and heavy feeling of dread that encompasses players throughout this 10 to 12 hour campaign is really impressive. Perhaps the game's greatest strength. It is also a difficult game, just as the genre which inspired it is known to be, but it does have various difficulty options for those less experienced players out there. The default soldier difficulty is how I played, but you can also opt for veteran if you seek a steeper challenge. With the veteran difficulty, you will have less item slots available in your bag, less resources overall, and more challenging enemies to contend with. There are also training and recruit options for those that don't want to feel stressed out at all. I say options are always a good thing, and Conscript even takes an additional step by allowing players to have unlimited saves and some checkpoints too. In traditional survival horror fashion, players can expect plenty of item gathering, resource management, tricky puzzles, and clunky old combat. Conscript is broken up into chapters and also features a decent map system for getting around. The map will have various on-screen indicators for those important areas that you've discovered, and there's also names for each area that you explore. Also helpful is that locked doors are labeled so you know which key will unlock which door. The map overall features some decent modern-day refinements that help to ease some of the moments where you'll become confused or lost. Some, not all, but we'll get into that a bit more later. Much of Conscript involves collecting items, which are generally well illuminated. Key items will sparkle on screen, while other items such as bandages for healing or ammunition may be discovered through smashing barrels using a melee weapon or looting items off of defeated foes. Just as you would expect, your inventory only holds so much, but it can be upgraded just a bit by trading cigarettes that you collect to a vendor. This vendor will hang out in safe rooms most often, easily identified by classic chill music, lighting, and storage boxes. The vendor is a clear tribute to the one out of Resident Evil 4, with an achievement even paying tribute to that classic survival horror game. Memos are also scattered across this world, which will clue you in on story bits and also offer helpful hints related to future puzzles. And then there's the combat, my least favorite aspect of Conscript. It's slow and feels just as bad as you were probably expecting it to. Melee combat involves staying planted in place while swinging away with the back trigger. You can hold it down for an extended time to unleash a more powerful attack. Being stuck in place leaves you quite vulnerable, as you would imagine, and I found that most encounters quickly became back and forth games of rock'em sock'em robots, hope you survive, and then heal up with bandages. Guns really don't fare much better due to the game's slow and frustrating combat mechanics, so honestly your best course of action is to often hide in designated areas until enemies pass, or run from them. You can kinda snipe from a distance with some of the guns and you might get lucky, but for the most part, the combat just really didn't work in this title for me, despite the fact that there is a roll that is handy sometimes. Your stamina is limited, so the run feels pretty useless for a lot of the game. Now sure, there are some upgrades available for weapons via gun parts that you discover, but your melee weapons are also breakable. There are some repair kits for that, but I hate breakable items in games, I just want to say that. There's also armor you can collect so that you can sustain more hits, but that eventually breaks too. Overall, the combat never feels very fun. In fact, it only gets worse when the game introduces rats, which stick to you like flies on shit. Players can toss grenades into specifically labeled holes to destroy the rat traps, but it's never a guarantee that you're gonna have that grenade on you at the right moment, and that leads to a lot of unnecessary frustration and damage. The puzzle design in this title is not revolutionary, but it's actually pretty good. Many environmental clues lead to your solutions, so expect plenty of the usual number combinations, and many of the puzzles come down to finding the right items and then backtracking to the correct locations. Yes, you will be doing a ton of backtracking in this game, but still, some of the puzzles were clever enough to make me say, "Ah, that was a cool little solution." Unfortunately, another flaw with Conscript is its lack of direction at times. Yes, the map is solid, but even still, I wasted hours, if not more, just not having a clear idea of what to do next. A bit more guidance at times would have gone a long way in helping the overall pacing of the entire experience. Despite some of its mechanical shortcomings, Conscript's visuals and atmosphere impress. The game does a great job of capturing the violence and horrors of war. While it is not a scary game where creatures jump out at you, there is a looming dread that feels effective. Bunkers are well detailed down to the barbed wire, and the dark settings, which can be illuminated via a torchlight, are nothing short of stunning. The animations and overall look of the game remind me a bit of the PS1 era title Legacy of Kain. Everything from the smoke effects following a grenade to close-up shots during Conscript's occasional rare cutscenes, the visual design really struck a chord with me. Sound design is also quite good, though there's not all that much music in the game with a greater focus on sound effects. This was a good decision, I'd say, as moments such as when you discover a save room and are greeted to a peaceful melody help to relax the player and ease tensions for just a brief moment. It's a great looking and sounding product overall. Conscript does have a bit of replay value for players looking to challenge themselves. There's an insane 3-hour completion achievement to be accomplished that I would love to see, and some other fun unlockables I won't spoil here. So despite its shortcomings in combat and a few other areas, Conscript still delivers a solid survival horror experience that fans of survival horror should consider giving a look. It is a unique title within the genre that can be just as much fun as it is frustrating. I'm gonna award Conscript the Bronze Genie Lamp of Approval.